Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlicker, shills, death slicers, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm Useful Idiot. Welcome. And let's go to Asia and talk about the fact that this whole pivot to Asia. Remember the whole pivot to Asia, all this talk during the Obama administration. And of course, the Trans-Pacific Partnership was part of this pivot to Asia and moving to basically encircle and try and neuter China. And then over the last couple of years, of course, we've seen all these tensions rise in the South China Sea as well between all these different countries, and the United States rattling its sword in that region, and so the risk of conflict seemed like it was on the rise. But this fabled pivot to Asia looks like it's unraveling before Barack Obama is even out of office. So first of all, we have the Trans-Pacific Partnership seems to be dying a quick death or slow death, depending on how you're looking at it. And things are changing rapidly because not only is Donald Trump coming into office and Barack Obama going out, and everybody's kind of switching sides pretty quickly. So one has to ask, how committed were a lot of these countries to this anyway? Was it just all for the purposes of the U.S. empire? It kind of looks that way. One of the more dramatic ones is Australia. There's a new China-sponsored trade agreement, regional trade agreement with 16 countries, and Australia's already jumping on board. The rejection of the TPP is hardly settled, and we have Australia jumping ship already. And then Vietnam also, notably, each day part of this pivot to Asia seems to be crumbling, and today Vietnam showed up. So Obama just visited there and set it up arms deals and the like, and papered the way for the Vietnam to join the empire and be part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And now the Prime Minister shelved the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and they were already ready to ratify it, but now they because it's been suspended, they are not going to bother ratifying it. And they're already part of 12 free trade agreements in the region already, and of course are also already working with China. But now, once again, they're moving away from this orbit. And in fact, the Prime Minister said, in light of the new election, they're emphasizing their own foreign policy and independence. I don't necessarily think they're nervous about what Trump's going to do. I think they're just taking the opportunity to fork out their own direction. And then, like I say, a lot of these are notable stories, but let's tie them all together. All are notable stories on their own. South Korea is another one. As of November 12th, there's 1 million people gathered in the streets of Seoul, South Korea, to demand the president, Park Geun-hye, resignation. And 1 million people in the street. And this is just over an embezzlement scandal. I mean, God, you couldn't get people out, and 1 million people out in the streets in the United States over just an average garden variety embezzlement scandal involving the president of the country. I mean, really. But apparently it's a sign of 4 years of frustration, and 60% of the population actually support this uprising, and they want the president to resign. And the president, of course, is an American puppet, and there'll be president, if the president does resign, he'll just be replaced by another American puppet. But once again, interesting to see the pressures of this Asian pivot by the United States causing the whole thing to unravel. Then we have the Philippines. I mean, that's been one of the ones that's been in the press a lot because their President Duterte is very outspoken, to say the least. And I love some of the stuff he's saying. A man after my own heart. He said once, quote, "Mr. Obama, you can go to hell," quote, called your president, quote, "your president is a goddamn son of a bitch," unquote. And then one time also mentioned that he, quote, "I don't give a shit about them," unquote. So a man after my own heart, needless to say. And once again, I don't really know that much about the gentleman per se. I'm going to look up some more information, but obviously he's very hard on narcotics, which is a very big problem in the Philippines, and supposedly he's killed upwards of 3,000 people or more, I understand, in the last few months. And he's given a reputation for being extrajudicial in not only going after people who sell drugs, but also people who take drugs. and so very controversial. But he has ended all U.S. joint military operations between him and the Philippines and the United States after this last one, and has come out in public and said he's renewing his friendship with China and Russia, and he even come out and said that it's Philippines, China, and Russia against the world. And in a lot of ways, I understand this. He's well aware of history, and I'll attach some articles below that go into that a little bit more. But considering the United States' long colonial history and brutal colonial history with the Philippines, I'm surprised we have the kind of relationship we have with the Philippines, other than events that unfolded in World War II. But the fact that the Duterte has 86% support of the people in that country, in spite of the kind of character he is, kind of makes me laugh, because once again, he is a very interesting character, but maybe his policies are going to have broad appeal in the Philippines and get things done in that country that couldn't be done before. And with 86% support, he certainly has somewhat of a mandate. But the United States is threatening to drop $9 million in military aid and $32 million in law enforcement as part of the fight against Muslim insurgents, and in the United States trying to keep its foothold there, including bases, military bases that seem to be going back and forth. But Duterte bragged about John Kerry coming there and having a meal and then leaving him $33 million, and suggests that maybe he should defend the United States some more, because then he could get some more money. So I can't really add much to that. What a great way to put it. And he obviously has no illusions about his relationship with the United States, while the United States still is going out of its way to coddle this this ally in the region. But it seems like they're certainly drifting out of the orbit of the U.S. empire at this point, and once again a pivotal member, so to speak, of the Asian pivot, no longer in the U.S. axis. And then we have a couple other stories that just came out recently that show that a couple more countries in the region are also falling out of the United States empire and axis in this whole pivot. Thailand, which is working with China over dissidents right now, and they actually bought submarines from China recently as well. And in fact, since 2012, China has been Thailand's largest trading partner, and ostensibly a military regime on and off in that country, and very close relationships with China right now. And that's interesting to me historically too, because I remember during the Vietnam War, Thailand was quite the ally for the United States, and supported the effort there wholeheartedly, and it turned into quite a local refuge for American troops in the war zone there. But since then, of course, now they've fluctuated in and out of the orbit of China and the United States. But right now it's China. In fact, there's a Thai-China rail project in the works as well that will only tie those countries closer together. So once again, a country that has not that much to gain necessarily from the Trans-Pacific Partnership and being part of the U.S. orbit in that region. They have more affinity for the Asian markets in that region already, and certainly China. And then lastly, we have Malaysia. Malaysia is now shifting, and the winds are changing there as well. They're buying 4 Chinese military vessels, and now are pledging to work closer with China as well, and are negotiating their differences in the South China Sea with China. And like with these other countries, there's a huge trade with China. China's second biggest trading partner. Malaysia's sovereign wealth funds, $3.5 billion missing. So that's the big story recently, corruption. And with that kind of corruption, they have all the reason to maybe realign their affinities. But like I say, now we have Malaysia, we have Vietnam, we have South Korea, we have all these countries now that are falling out of the axis of the United States quickly before the Barack Obama is even out of office. And so it seems like hard to imagine we're going to hear much more about the pivot to Asia, at least for the time being. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too?